Hello everyone and welcome to this week's episode of the Ratliff Mandolins Weekly Production Diary. We're just going to pick up where we left off in last week's episode with the guitar binding channel jig, and I worked on it some this weekend. So let me just start this episode off with giving you a progress report on how far we've got with this tool. So let me hit the high spots before we take a real close look at it. There's a tray that holds a guitar body that slides underneath the cutter head of this router with a special bit to cut the binding channel. The depth adjustment or tolerances is provided by the hinges here. Everything is mounted to this taller tower. And I made this tower taller because this thing is heavy. It's already fell down and smashed my finger once. So we're going to try to put some eye bolts and stuff here and use bungee cords to find a sweet spot where it can move and yet not be so heavy and so dangerous. And then we need to put some adjustment in that, and I think I've got it worked out in my head what we're going to do, but we'll show you that when I get around to doing it. So let me take the camera and just do a walk around and give you a really close view of it. These are simply door hinges bought at a local big box store. And as you can see, there's 4 of them. This mounts to the tower and this mounts to the back of the router tray. And no matter which way it goes up or down, the router tray itself stays perpendicular to the tabletop. So that's how that works. This is about 9 or 10 inches. I can't remember the exact measurement, and this is about 1 foot. And coming around back, we have this big table part that can be clamped to this bench or that bench or any normal workbench, and the main front where everything's attached, and then these 2 supports that keeps everything square and solid, and it's securely screwed into place. So everything is pretty good and solid, and that pretty much covers the base and of the body and the moving mechanisms. And I'll just real quick give you a close-up shot of the router tray. It is very simply just a wooden box mounted onto those hinges back here. It's made just to fit this router or anything slightly smaller. The router is bolted to the floor of the box. And on the bottom side of that box has been bolted this Teflon plate, very gently sloped to hopefully match the back of a guitar. And when the router bit will come through and hang out, and this the guitar itself will ride on this green plate, and well, that's the way that's supposed to work. And like I said earlier, we're going to put a bungee cord up here, or maybe 2 or 5, I don't know. I have a whole box full of eye bolts, all different kinds of eye bolts, and I went and bought a value pack of bungee cords. And so we're going to see if we can't devise some system that will hold the bulk of the tray weight. That's a big one. So that's where we're at bright and early on Monday morning. Not that far away from being able to give this thing a test run. And so just stick around, we'll see what happens. Okay, let me see if I can explain this here. I have a piece of angle aluminum attached to a board that has an angle cut in it with an eye bolt and a wing nut on it. And around back here, that piece of angle is attached by those screws, and then everything is bolted to the front right here. And for the moment, I just have a bungee cord hooked on that, but by golly, we are close. And I say that because this router is more or less floating within the range of motion that it needs to be in, with very little weight on it. This doesn't take much at all to push it up. So I think we're really close, just some adjusting, and I'm probably going to put some eye bolts here and like that right there, so that we can hook this thing more professional looking. And I think we're getting pretty close to being done with it. Well, this part's done. Seems to be working fairly well. Looks nice and neat. So I'm going to stop for the moment and just do cleanup, because in projects like this, you get tools scattered everywhere. So I'm going to clean up everything, and then we'll start thinking about setting the router bit and maybe making some sort of test run just to make sure everything works the way it's supposed to. I have here a maple-bodied guitar that I built several years ago and never finished. Just the carcass here. Don't have a neck cord or anything. And I have it bound. For some reason or another, I have the back bound, and I don't have any more of that type of binding. So I've decided, as a test run for this machine, we're going to take this back piece of binding off and see if the machine runs the way it's supposed to. And here's some footage of that being done. And I am pleased as punch to report that that worked just wonderfully. I am thrilled to bits. Well, the binding slot cutter worked wonderfully, and I have this test guitar has the first channel. The one on the back is ready to glue binding on. And I have put together this concoction, which is basically a board shaped like a guitar with nails driven in the side, some holder stops. This was something that we used before, as I mentioned earlier. So it's just kind of a repurposing. And I rolled up some rags so that we don't scar the guitar up, as a test run anyway. This is going to sit down in here. Yeah, I don't think that'll be fine. Then I took this piece of plywood, like this, and drove some nails in it, and took a rag and patted the back of it so it don't scratch the guitar. And we are going to take some rubber bands and pretend that we've got binding in here and want to clamp it in. And I'm going to just kind of test run this whole idea here to see if it'll work actually. Well, it seems to be a viable idea to use the rubber bands and the thing on top and the thing on bottom. As you can see, it pretty much holds all the binding in place. The advantage of this system is going to be, I hope, that as you're gluing around here and you need to glue, you can just take your rubber band off. Missing one rubber band ain't going to change anything. Spread your glue, come back and put it on. If you've used string, say, and you've got your string back and forth, then if you're gluing this side, you can't take this side's string back off to glue this. But I think with this system, you can glue the entire guitar in one gluing. So we're going to see if that works right now. Well, that appears to have worked wonderfully. Here's a close-up. Now I have this maple D-size guitar with the back bound. It's got a lot of glue squeeze out and stuff. It needs to be cleaned off, but looks like it was a good job. I'll stop for a moment and say that I guess you've probably figured out that this whole thing that I've built, this thing, this tray, this little thing here, was all pretty much centered around this guitar repair, because technically I'm still doing repairs. So this is the little guitar that I took the top off, stripped all the braces out, and re-braced it, glued that back on. Now we're going to rebind it, and I didn't have any way to rebind it. So, and I knew that I was going to need to bind some things, give me a chance to revive that old project that I had shelved for a while. And this project here, which is going to be one of the instruments in the next batch, my little T-Play Terz guitar, mandola, whatever you want to call it, it's going to need to be bound. This needed to be bound, and that one had been on the shelf for the last 10 or 15 years waiting to be bound and have a neck put on it. So this whole thing was started for mainly this, but it's killed 2 or 3 birds with one stone. Having said that, this guitar is ready to have the binding cut, the binding channel cut, which is what I'm going to do. And we're going to double bind this, much like I do the 3-ply binding on a mandolin. We're going to do a ledged cut with this thing. I bought some special bits to do that with. And we're going to make it white and then an inner white, black, white strip. So that's what I'm getting ready to do right now. I'll go ahead and get that inner strip glued, and while it's drying, I will back up and hit the sandpaper on the D model guitar and clean that mess up. If this is dry, we'll move on, and if not, then I'll go about preparing this thing to glue the back on, which I have the back ready. It's got all its braces and everything on it. It's just not glued on. And I want to put a pickup in this one, so we're going to put a K&K inside guitar pickup with the input jack right here. And I can install that and get this perfect, sanded, clean, and everything. And the back's pretty much already ready to glue on. So that will be more or less the order of importance of the projects that'll pretty much finish out the week. It's Wednesday afternoon, by the way. So I'm going to get with it. It is now Friday evening, and I'd like to say that this thing worked out wonderfully, and I got a lot of work done. I'll share that with you in just a second. This thing, like I said, it done the job. There were a couple of issues, minor issues with it, and if you'll come a little closer, I'll show them to you. The first thing that I got to mention is you knew that I put just regular door hinges on it for the raise and lower part, and I did that just with the hinges that I bought out of one of the big box stores. But nothing is really made with any great quality these days, and there's actually about a 1/4 of an inch back and forth play in those hinges. Now, it really didn't affect the way the thing worked and did its job, but I was aware of it. As you'd go one way and then kind of back up and change directions, it would pull that tray and you could feel it. And if I had it to do over again, I would either put 2 hinges on each side so that it didn't have that rock, or just, I thought I'd give too much money for those hinges to begin with, but might just have to go find some really high quality hinges to use. That's the first issue that I had, and like I said, it didn't affect the way the thing worked, but nevertheless it was noticeable. And the second issue, if you want to call it that, is it's something that's entirely of my own doing. I use this, it's an ancient Sears and Roebuck router, probably from the 60s. It's been through a fire and everything else. Now, it doesn't have any fine adjustment. You just loosen the knob here and manually pull the router up or down. So it's a little difficult to adjust the height of the cut, but it is very easy to pull out of the base and change the bearings on this special bit when you need to. So it's sort of a trade-off. And another thing is it's got the knobs and stuff here for adjusting the height in the front, but the on and off switch is here in the back. So it's a little tight. I actually thought about cutting it, and may do so, cut a big hole in this plywood here so you can just reach around this way to turn it on, but you just stick your finger back in there and flip the switch. But it's a little uncomfortable. Entirely of my own doing, and I think that I made this tray wide enough so that at any point in the future we can actually put a different router on there. So but it's in, like, again, much like the rock and tray, it's a perfectly workable system. You just have to be aware that it's got those quirks, I guess. Now, as far as the other ideas that went along with this whole setup, this tray right here performed wonderfully. Everything from a D-sized guitar to this little thing here fit in here. The height adjustment worked, and everything run just fine. And I'll show you this guitar here in a second. And this the whole idea of using the rubber bands worked really well with a flat board that more or less fits the guitar with some nails driven in the side. And I found that if you elevated this board, it was easier to reach down here and get the rubber bands to hook. And to do that, I had a bunch of cabinet drawer pulls, and I just screwed those in and made feet. And when I first started working on that D-size guitar, the first glue that I did, was a little hard to get it in there and do that. And I thought, boy, if that thing was just elevated, life would be a whole lot easier. And it was, and is. Now, speaking of the D model guitar and this thing, let me show you how far along I got on each of these instruments. This little Terz guitar here, I got an inner black-white strip glued in, and the wider white outer binding is done. Now, originally this thing had Ivoroid binding on the front and the back, so I still have to take this binding off the back and rebind it with a matching white strip for this, but I probably will not put the black and white inner circle on there. Just probably put a plain piece of white on the back. So we've made some progress on this thing, and I've sanded a little bit on the top. But it's probably going to have to be resanded and refinished. So we'll see about that. Now, let me show you the D style. Now, on that little guitar that we just looked at, of course, the top is bound and the back hasn't been. On this particular guitar, we actually started with the back, so it's done. And I did the same treatment to the top with a white outer binding and an inner white-black strip. And let me show you a close-up of that. And it's glued up, and so basically this entire guitar is completely bound now. Well, that's about all for now. I'll look for you on the next episode of the Ratliff Mandolins Weekly Production Diary. See you then.